Hey guys, tonight we sail into the warm breeze of the Indian Ocean, where soft sand kisses your bare feet and the faint scent of salt and cloves lingers in the air. You've just stumbled ashore on a crescent-shaped beach not found on most maps, a place so steeped in fantasy and fever dreams you'd swear you dreamt it up yourself. Coconut palms sway like half-drunk sentinels above a makeshift sign carved into driftwood. Welcome to Libertalia. You pause to wipe your brow. The heat sticks to your skin like syrup, and seagulls circle above, maybe judging your outfit. As your eyes adjust to the low golden light of evening, you spot them. Pirates, sure, but not the Johnny Depp kind. No parrots, no eyeliner. These are sun-leathered idealists in ragged shirts, waving half-empty bottles and quoting Rousseau like it's a tavern contest. One of them stumbles past, proudly wearing a sash made entirely of spoons. Another argues passionately about democracy while failing to open a coconut. It's not exactly Pirates of the Caribbean. It's more like Pirates of Community College. And you're here to join them, though you probably won't survive this, especially not with that sunburn you're already working on. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And drop a comment with where you're watching from and what time it is. I love seeing how far this little sleepy cruise sails. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. Your first steps through Libertalia feel like walking into a dream stitched together from half-remembered campfire tales and revolutionary pamphlets soaked in grog. The buildings are a strange mix, some made from driftwood and tar, others from stolen Portuguese stone bricks stacked with such enthusiasm and so little skill that they wobble ominously in the wind. There are no gates, no guards, only a lazy dog chewing on someone's boot, and a man in a hammock debating ethics with a parrot who probably doesn't agree. Historians still argue whether Libertalia ever truly existed. Some call it a myth wrapped in propaganda. Others believe it was a brief, chaotic glimmer of pirate enlightenment along the coast of Madagascar in the late 1600s. What is clear, though, is that it had a founder, a man named Captain James Misson, and that man had big ideas. Ideas that may have sounded even better after a few barrels of rum. For now, Libertalia looks functional-ish. Somewhere between shipwreck and social experiment. Children run barefoot through the sand, dodging chickens. Someone is playing a fiddle so badly that even the seagulls flinch. The town square, or what passes for it, is really just a sunken patch of dirt where debates are held, proclamations are shouted, and laundry is inexplicably dried on a broken cannon. You walk past a pair of pirates haggling over a spoon and a chunk of salted fish. A third man approaches them and proposes a barter involving 2 sea biscuits and a French novel with most of its pages missing. This is the economy here, not gold or silver, but a barter system as wobbly as the tree-house-shaped inn looming in the background. The inn, by the way, is called the Democratic Drunk. Its sign is crooked, and one of the letters has clearly been replaced with a seashell. But the place is full of life. Inside, pirates of every background crowd around uneven tables. They speak in French, English, Malagasy, Dutch, even Swahili, often in the same sentence. I overhear someone say, "So we voted, and now dogs are citizens. The room cheers. A dog barks. In agreement." Or protest. It's hard to say. You're handed a drink that smells like mango, clove, and regret. You sip anyway. It's not bad. A bit like fermented pineapple mixed with warm vinegar, but drinkable, if only because it makes everything around you feel a little bit more believable. Here's the thing about Libertalia. It wasn't just a pirate hideout. It was supposed to be a revolution. No kings, no slavery, no taxes, just freedom, brotherhood, and very questionable hygiene. And for a short while, it worked. Sort of. You wander further inland, past a squat building with a painted mural of two hands shaking over a treasure chest. Above it is written, "For all, not the few." Next to it, someone has scrawled, "Unless it's really shiny," in charcoal. A breeze carries the sound of laughter and distant music. Chickens cluck. Someone starts shouting about the shared banana surplus, which doesn't sound real, but in Libertalia, what does? There are no churches here, no gallows, no governors. Just people trying to rewrite society with what they've got. Half a dozen muskets, 4 shovels, and a communal dream stitched together from old maps and even older grudges. Historians suggest Misson and his crew were inspired by Enlightenment thinkers, by religious dissent, and maybe by boredom. It's not clear. What is clear is that they wanted something different and, crucially, were too stubborn to see the flaws coming. You walk down a narrow alleyway where an argument unfolds between a pirate and a carpenter about whether hammocks or bunks promote better democratic sleep. You don't stay for the outcome. There's a moment as the sun dips low, turning the whole town gold and purple, where it actually feels like it could all work. Children laugh in the distance. A sea breeze rolls through the palm trees. Somewhere a voice sings a lullaby in Malagasy. You feel something stir, like maybe, just maybe, this little speck of sand and salt and rebellion could be more than a footnote. Maybe it could last. Then a cannon fires by accident, and someone yells, "That's not supposed to happen until Tuesday!" The dream wobbles a little. But hey, so do most dreams. You hear about him long before you see him. Captain Misson. Le Capitaine, if you want to sound fancy about it. The stories float around Libertalia like sea foam. Some say he was born to French nobility, others that he deserted the Navy mid-battle to save a chicken. One man insists he once saw Misson walk straight into a Portuguese fort and walk out 10 minutes later with a map, a bottle of port, and 3 extra crew members. He may have also picked up a small dog. Whatever the truth, he's the reason you're here, trudging through the dusty main path of Libertalia with sweat running down your back and 2 sand fleas already staked out behind your left knee. The captain's palace, if you can call it that, is a lopsided 2-story structure made from ship timber and covered in faded naval flags, each one repurposed as curtains, doors, or decorative napkins. A cannon sticks out of one window like an awkward elbow. The staircase creaks like it's trying to confess something. And there he is, Captain James Misson, standing barefoot on the porch, cradling a mug that smells of cloves and whatever passes for coffee in this part of the world. He's younger than you expected, gaunt, suntanned, with a jawline that suggests he's gritted his teeth through 100 bad ideas. His coat is red velvet, scorched at the edges. His hair is pulled back, more beach-combed than combed. He smiles like a man who knows he's doing something ridiculous and dares you to say so. "You made it," he says, voice warm, French accent still clinging to every word. "Libertalia welcomes those who believe in freedom, or at least those who dislike kings." You nod. You don't dislike kings per se, but the idea of an island where nobody can order you to swab a deck again sounds lovely. Missin gestures for you to sit in a chair made of driftwood and optimism. He begins talking, not in pirate speak, mind you. No yars here. His language is more like a philosophy lecture that's been gently marinated in rum. He tells you about his time in the French Navy, how he grew disillusioned watching officers beat sailors for sneezing at the wrong time, how he read too many banned books, how one night during a resupply stop near Naples he got roaring drunk with a Dominican priest named Caracoli, and the two of them, half laughing, half weeping, began sketching out a new society on the back of a map. No kings, no slavery, no forced tithes, a republic of equals, a pirate nation, but, with ethics. Historians still argue whether Caracoli was a real person or just a particularly well-read hangover. Some sources claim he was a defrocked Jesuit. Others suggest he was more like a walking allegory with a taste for smoked herring. Either way, Missin swore by him, kept a copy of his writings in a waterproof pouch tied to his belt, and regularly quoted his sermons, which sound suspiciously like pamphlets. You interrupt once, asking why Missin didn't just try to reform France instead of, founding a utopian pirate outpost next to a mosquito lagoon. He grins. Because in France, they throw you in prison. Here, we throw you a party. Can't argue with that. You tour the rest of the compound. The council room is a shaded platform with 3 hammocks and a table made from half a rowboat. There's a map of the surrounding coastline scratched onto a chunk of sailcloth with bold arrows labeled things like possible ally, might eat us, and definitely Portuguese. Below that is a growing list of rules, including 1. No man shall own another. 2. All treasure shall be shared equally. 3. No dueling before breakfast. 4. Chickens are not currency. Again. 5. Hammocks are communal. Please rinse after use. The rules are voted on weekly. You learn this when someone poses rule number 6. The captain must bathe at least once a moon. Michon pretends to object, but eventually nods. There's a moment when he looks at the sea, eyes far away. "It won't last," he murmurs. "Nothing does. But for now, we dream it anyway." You glance around at the mismatched town, the barefoot idealists, the goat currently chewing on a ledger. "Seems like the kind of dream you wake up sticky from," you say. He laughs. "Bien sûr, but it's our dream." Later, as dusk creeps in and the salt breeze cools the back of your neck, Michon walks you to the edge of town, pointing out where the next fishing boats are expected. He talks about organizing schools, sharing knowledge, preparing for trade with local Malagasy tribes. His optimism is boundless, bordering on delusional. And yet, something about it tugs at you. The idea that a man who once obeyed the cruel rhythms of naval life could chuck it all and say, "No, we build better," even if better sometimes smells like fermenting cassava and bad decisions. By the time you part ways, the stars are pricking through the sky like spilt sugar, and you can hear the council arguing in the distance, something about whether parrots deserve voting rights. You don't know it yet, But you'll remember this moment years from now, as the smoke rises from a town no longer standing. For now, though, Captain Michon believes, and for a little while, that's more than enough.
Recruiting for a pirate utopia is not as easy as you'd think. Sure, come live free on a tropical island with no kings and all the rum you can carry. Sounds like a pretty compelling elevator pitch. But the seas are full of skeptical men with swords, debts, and absolutely zero patience for philosophy. Still, Captain Misson manages it. You watch from the docks one bright, coconut-scented morning as the Libertalia recruits arrive, one rowboat at a time. There's no uniform inspection or welcome committee, just a man playing a lute poorly and a woman handing out cold coconut water with a single deadpan warning. No stabbing until after you've unpacked. The new arrivals are a strange stew. Runaway sailors, escaped slaves, disgruntled merchants, even a disgraced Portuguese cartographer who claims he once mapped an island shaped like a spoon. One man wears a British naval coat over no pants and insists he's between names right now. You stand next to Misson as he greets them, one by one. No questions about criminal pasts or skill sets, just one phrase repeated again and again. Do you accept the code of liberty? Most nod, a few grunt, one sneezes. Historians still argue whether Misson had any recruitment standards at all, or if he was simply accepting anyone who didn't immediately try to stab him. But the truth is, for a society built on dreams and plunder, the bar was always going to be a little low. There is a ceremony, though, of sorts. Each new recruit steps forward and places their hand on the Constitution of Libertalia, a single sun-bleached scroll that's been rewritten so many times it crackles like dry leaves. They mumble and vow, something about equality, freedom, and not yelling during meetings. Then, as tradition now dictates, they're handed one silver coin, a hammock tag, and a small piece of fruit, usually overripe. You help show a few of them around. The tailor, who's never actually tailored anything, proudly explains how he repurposed sailcloth into vests. The local brewer offers a sip of something that tastes like regret aged in coconut shells. Someone has already started carving the word barbershop into a plank of wood, though their tools appear to be 2 spoons and a broken dagger. It's chaotic. It's disorganized. It's oddly charming. That afternoon, Misson calls for a general assembly on the beach. Everyone is welcome, except the chickens, who have been known to interrupt speeches. He stands atop an overturned boat and begins one of his now famous recruitment speeches. You've heard versions of it before, but it still gets you. We come from kingdoms that chained us, from ships that whipped us, from cities that ignored our hunger. Here, on this sunlit shore, we are equals, not by birthright, but by choice. Here, we speak with no lords. We eat from the same fire, and we bury our dead with the same tears. You are not crew. You are not subjects. You are citizens. Applause. Cheering. Someone yells, "Tell that to the goats," which, unclear context, but the moment holds. There are challenges, of course. Not everyone speaks the same language, and the universal translator, named Enrique, is mostly just a former Spanish cook who makes up phrases when confused. One group of Malagasy fishers, invited to join the Republic, arrive with baskets of dried shrimp and very serious expressions. They seem unimpressed by the pirate juggling act that greets them. Still, they stay for the meeting. They leave with new hats and several jokes about how Libertalia smells like fish that lost a bet. The evenings become louder, more crowded. The fires burn longer.
Stories are shared of naval battles, betrayals, loves lost in Lisbon, treasures buried and definitely never found again. You hear about a woman who disguised herself as a man for 3 years just to escape a nobleman's house. About a man who escaped a slave ship by floating ashore inside a water barrel. It's not just that Misson is recruiting sailors. He's building a collective memory, a mythology made up of second chances and salty jokes. One night, you help paint a welcome sign. It reads, "Libertalia, for those who refuse chains." The sign is misspelled. Nobody corrects it. A few disagreements break out among the new citizens. One man insists on sleeping in the shade of the communal latrine for spiritual reasons. Another claims he brought his own laws and wants to enforce them personally. The council handles it by letting both men talk themselves into exhaustion, then assigning them latrine duty. Surprisingly, it works. There's a kind of logic here, fluid, sun-drenched, occasionally nonsensical, but it keeps people together, at least for now. One particularly memorable recruit is a toothless old woman from Martinique who claims to be a retired smuggler. She arrives with a parrot and 3 barrels of pickled eggs. Within a week, she's running the town's first tavern, which is really just a tarp, 2 crates, and a jug labeled "Why Not?" She calls herself Madame Sabine and begins issuing tab tokens shaped like seashells. You ask what happens if someone doesn't pay. She smiles. Then we find out who runs faster. Somewhere between the newcomer's questionable tattoos and the nightly impromptu speeches, Libertalia begins to feel full. Not crowded, just alive. Like a page turning mid-story. Of course, it's only a matter of time before someone tries to bring up taxes. You hear the word whispered one morning by a particularly well-dressed Dutch recruit. "Maybe we need some structure," he says, sipping tea from a mug shaped like a skull. "An economy. Regulations." The silence that follows is long enough for a crab to scuttle entirely across the square. Misson responds the only way he knows how. He starts another festival. Music, dancing, roasted fish, a brief and deeply unconvincing stage play about equality involving several wigs and a coconut dressed as a judge. You realize the truth that night as you lie in your hammock, the air thick with salt and laughter. Libertalia recruits with promises, yes, but it keeps people with stories. By now, you've noticed that nothing in Libertalia is done by half measures. Except maybe carpentry, which is frequently 40% optimism and 60% gravity defiance. So when the Republic decides it's time to create a proper governing code, naturally it's a communal affair, held at the beach with rum. The drafting of the Libertalian Constitution takes place under a sprawling tamarind tree, with makeshift benches fashioned from barrels, crates, and, in one case, a beached canoe. The Council of Commons gathers, about 20 pirates, former slaves, fisherfolk, and one stubborn donkey that refuses to move unless it hears music. You're given a plank and told it's your desk. Someone hands out shells and pebbles as voting tokens. The official writing instrument is a single quill feather that looks like it lost a fight with a seagull. Misson opens the session with what might generously be called a sermon. He quotes Cicero, Caraccioli, and a book he admits he hasn't fully read. His voice carries across the sand. "Let no man be above another. save in kindness. Half the audience claps. The other half is just trying to see if there's lunch. You're assigned to the Committee for Laws Not to be Ignored, which is immediately renamed the Definitely Serious Laws Committee after someone gets into a shouting match about punctuation. The first law proposed, all men and women are equal citizens. The second, freedom of belief shall be respected. The third, no one shall be forced to clean latrines more than once a week. The debates are both spirited and oddly specific. A former merchant from Goa insists on clauses protecting spice imports. A British sailor wants legal protections for bartering romantic tokens. Madame Sabine proposes a mandatory nap hour. This gets unanimous approval, to no one's surprise. Historians still argue whether this document was truly the work of enlightened thought or just the collective ramblings of pirates with sunstroke. One surviving version reads more like a community theater script crossed with a treasure map, but it's real enough to be nailed to the community post just below the notice warning against unsanctioned duels before sunrise. The Constitution's preamble, written in a mix of French, English, and something vaguely resembling Portuguese, opens with, "We, the free, gathered by tide and will, do promise to build a life not built on chains, crowns, or coin, but on mutual trust, shared bread, and agreed-upon hammocks." You can't help but admire the absurdity and sincerity all tangled together. To celebrate, there's a bonfire. Not your average campfire either. This one is fueled by driftwood, broken barrels, and one particularly ugly chair that no one wanted to claim. As flames crackle into the night sky, the newly minted citizens of Libertalia take turns reading the Constitution aloud, each in their native tongue. Even the donkey gets a turn, though it mostly just chews on the scroll. One man sings his part, a woman raps hers. You recite yours nervously, mispronouncing at least 2 core principles. No one minds. You're part of it now. There's an unmistakable thrill in the air, like the early moments of a parade no one really planned. People begin forming little guilds, informal associations really, the Builders Circle, the Saltfish Syndicate, a group calling themselves the Hammock Ethics Committee, who plan to enforce Rule 5, rinse after use. You're not sure what their jurisdiction is, but they seem serious about it. Misson, ever the idealist, insists that power rotate weekly. There is no official leader, only guides, chosen by vote and expected to shout a lot less than average. The current guide is a Somali helmsman with a booming voice and a love of sea shanties about bureaucrats falling overboard. One day you attend a hearing. A crew member has been accused of hoarding sugar. The court convenes on the beach. Arguments are made with gestures, half-logic, and one interpretive dance. The final verdict is guilty, but charmingly so. He's sentenced to share the sugar and perform a song about sharing. He agrees badly. It becomes a town favorite. What becomes clear night after night, vote after vote, is that these pirates, these dreamers, aren't just building laws, they're building norms, rules that live more in the rhythms of daily life than in any ink on parchment. Of course, there are flaws. One clause in the Constitution says, all treasures must be equally divided. This sparks an intense debate about what counts as treasure. Are rare herbs treasure? What about an especially funny seashell? Or the Portuguese spyglass someone found that only works if you squint? The arguments continue long into the week. Eventually, they defined treasure as anything shiny or otherwise causing envy. This turns out to be dangerously vague. You help post the new definitions around town, nailing them to palm trees and one enthusiastic goat who doesn't seem to mind. Sometimes you wonder if this experiment is just a wind-blown mirage held together by optimism and stubbornness. But then, as you walk through the settlement at dusk, listening to the soft strum of a lute, smelling fresh bread and fried fish, watching children skip stones into the bay, you realize something important. Nobody's whipping anyone. Nobody's bowing to a crest, a bishop, or a man with a ring. Nobody's starving while others dine on silk tablecloths. That might not make it a perfect place, but it makes it better than the world most of you left behind. A final note that evening is pinned to the town board. Tomorrow's meeting will be about currency. Please bring examples of things you think might be valuable. No more sea glass, please. It's getting out of hand. You go to sleep with the Constitution folded under your hammock mat and dreams of republics swaying gently in the night breeze. Some pirate flags strike fear into the hearts of entire navies. Others just confuse people. The Libertalia flag falls firmly in the second category. It starts, as many things do here, with a community vote. Masson proposes that every true republic needs a symbol, something to fly from the town's tallest pole, currently a coconut tree with an unfortunate tilt. Suggestions are shouted from every corner of the square. You scribble them on parchment as best you can. A pair of clasped hands over a ship's wheel, a fish wearing a crown with a red X through it, a single radiant sun with no kings beneath it, a spoon and a sword crossing over a loaf of bread. Madame Sabine votes for a chicken. Nobody knows why. She refuses to explain. Eventually, after much debate and a suspiciously persuasive argument from a man who can only draw fish, the town settles on a design. A white field with a golden circle at the center, surrounded by 4 black stars, one for the main languages spoken in Libertalia. The materials are limited. The town seamstress, who used to sew sails for Portuguese galleons, gathers what she can. Curtain scraps, an old French naval flag, someone's shirt, and an apron embroidered with the word, "Bless this mess." She stitches them all together with twine and sea silk thread, humming as she works. The result is soft, sort of lunky. It ripples in the breeze like a wet towel and doesn't look particularly fearsome. You help raise it during the naming ceremony. There's music, impromptu poetry, and a moment where a goat tries to eat one corner before being bribed away with a banana peel. The flag flutters above the town square, catching the late morning sun. Reactions from the outside world? Mixed. A nearby Dutch merchant ship spots the flag and mistakes it for a quarantine warning. They turn away immediately. A British trader assumes it's a signal for new colony under construction. A pirate crew sailing out of Zanzibar reportedly sees it and sends a message, "Nice drapery. Are you open for trade or just arts and crafts?" You're assigned to flag defense duty one night after a storm blows it partially into the latrine trench. It's salvaged, washed, twice, and rehung with slightly more tension, though now the gold circle looks more like a lopsided egg. Historians still argue what the flag symbolized. Some claim the gold circle represented the sun of liberty. Others believe it was originally a serving plate and the design simply stuck. A few argue the stars were meaningless from the start, but everyone agrees it was one of the least terrifying pirate banners ever hoisted. And maybe that was the point. Unlike the Jolly Roger, with its skulls, crossbones, and unspoken promise of violence, Libertalia's flag whispered, "We are weird. We're peaceful. We'll share our bread if you don't shoot first." Which, unfortunately, was also its greatest weakness. That gentle message didn't play well with aggressive traders or slavers passing along the African coast. Some captains viewed the flag as an invitation, not a warning. A few tried to dock uninvited, hoping to exploit the town's infamous open arms and terrible watchtower policy. More than once, libertalian citizens had to repel boarders using coconuts, frying pans, and shouted legal principles. You begin to wonder if a skull or two might have been helpful. The council debates changing the flag. Some say it's too soft, too philosophical. Others argue that altering it would betray the founding values. Misson, predictably, insists the flag must represent hope, not horror. "Let others fly death," he says one morning, his eyes ringed with sleepless idealism. "We will fly dignity." You're pretty sure the goat disagrees, but it's chewing a sock at the time, so no formal protest is lodged. One day, an actual flag expert, yes, that's a real thing apparently, arrives from a Portuguese ship that's been reluctantly allowed to dock for trade. He offers to redesign the symbol for clarity, menace, and brand coherence. His proposal? A black sail with an open palm on it, painted blood red. He's voted down in under 10 seconds. Meanwhile, the original flag gets patched more and more until it's mostly made of new material, like a philosophical ship of Theseus. At one point, someone replaces a damaged star with an embroidered fish. Nobody notices for 3 days. You spend an afternoon with the children of the town as they sketch improved versions of the flag. One includes a shark playing a lute. Another shows a son with legs dancing across a treasure map. The kids vote for their favorite, a loaf of bread wearing a crown, then stepping on it defiantly. You pin it to the school hut wall. Bread King becomes an unofficial mascot. All these tiny evolutions, the strange patches, the doodles, the fish star, become part of the flag's strange charm. It becomes a living artifact, a visual joke and a serious oath rolled into one, flapping quietly above a town that refuses to conform. And yet, sometimes ships pass by on the horizon, and you watch them through a spyglass, the one that only works if you squint and tilt your head. You wonder how many dismiss Libertalia with a laugh just from that little square of cloth. Let them laugh, Misson says when you voice the concern. We're not here to conquer. We're here to prove another way is possible. You nod, though part of you still thinks Bread King might have made a better emblem. Later that evening, you catch sight of the flag under moonlight, tattered but proud, a patchwork emblem of misfits and mutual respect. You wonder if maybe the fact that it doesn't look like any other pirate flag is exactly what makes it worth flying, even if the goat tries to eat it again tomorrow. At first, Libertalia's economy is just shy of non-existent. There's no official currency, no banking system, and definitely no central authority counting beans. It's an economy built on good faith, shared fish, and the occasional haggled-over ripe mango. Naturally, things begin to unravel the moment someone tries to trade a spoon for a canoe. You find yourself roped into a town meeting about trade protocols, which turns into an enthusiastic shouting match about what even counts as valuable. Gold? Sure. Spices? Probably. A beautifully carved peg leg with a built-in drawer? Surprisingly, yes. But then someone insists their collection of exotic bird feathers is worth a barrel of rum, and the argument spirals into metaphysical territory. Eventually, Misson stands, brushing sand from his sleeves, and announces a solution: a barter ledger. Citizens may trade as they wish, but must record their deals publicly to prevent disputes. You're given the unenviable job of keeping the ledger, a large, unwieldy book already stained with fish juice and suspicious ink splotches. By week's end, the entries are as enlightening as they are confusing. 1 crab net exchanged for 2 nights of hammock use. 3 spoons traded for 1 week of haircuts, beard optional. Half a banana offered in friendship, declined without offense. Barrel of salted fish swapped for map with no north. The town's primary export seems to be salt fish, not because it's particularly good, but because it's durable, vaguely nutritious, and available in vast, stinking quantities. The fish, caught from the nearby reef and dried under the relentless Malagasy sun, is sold, or rather swapped, to passing ships and local communities for goods like tobacco, cloth, iron tools, and occasionally books, with most of the middle missing. The barter system works surprisingly well, until it doesn't. It starts with promises. A few of the more charismatic citizens begin offering future trades. I'll give you 5 coconuts next week if you lend me your net today. Or, I can't pay now, but I'll owe you a favor, a big one. Soon the ledger starts filling up with IOUs, most of them underwritten by nothing more than good intentions and a half wink. This is how Libertalia accidentally invents debt. You try to enforce accountability, but every time someone defaults, they just argue the original deal was spiritual or symbolic or part of a larger philosophical exchange. One man insists his side of the trade was fulfilled in the form of a hauntingly beautiful sea chanty. Another claims that emotional support counts as value. Meanwhile, the town is attracting more outside attention. Local Malagasy villages begin showing up with baskets of dried cassava and dyed cloth, curious about this oddball port that trades in everything from shell combs to French poetry. Misson tries to offer them partnership, mutual trade routes, shared defense, and full citizenship if desired. Some agree cautiously, others view the growing town with suspicion, especially after one unfortunate misunderstanding involving a ceremonial goat, a wooden statue, and a very loud accordion. Historians still debate how close Libertalia truly was to forming a permanent alliance with local communities. Some claim it was beginning to blossom into a Creole society, part European, part Malagasy, part whatever eccentricities the pirates brought with them. Others argue that the cultural divide, language gaps, and occasional rude gestures from drunk crew members made long-term friendship unlikely. Still, trade begins to expand. You help catalog the first real inventory in Libertalia's trade post, which is more of a lean-to covered in old sails and guarded by a parrot with a vendetta. The list includes 36 bundles of dried fish, 12 jars of fermented clove mash, 14 knives of wildly varying sharpness, 7 lobes of mystery bread, 1 pair of boots that squeak in Morse code, and a brass telescope that points in the wrong direction but looks very official. One unexpected export? Tall tales. Visiting sailors start carrying stories of the pirate republic that isn't just about plunder and rum. They describe debates on freedom under mango trees, laws voted on with colored pebbles, and songs about taxation without representation, sung to the tune of sea shanties. In Zanzibar, you hear, someone even tries to start a little Libertalia, though it collapses after 3 days when everyone refuses to clean the latrines. Back in town, the barter ledger becomes a source of both pride and confusion. Someone adds footnotes. Someone else draws cartoons in the margins. Eventually, a new law is passed. All IOUs must include one tangible item as collateral. Emotional support is not accepted. Of course, the rule is broken immediately. You catch a man trying to trade future inspiration for a hammock. You confiscate the hammock, then feel oddly inspired yourself. It's contagious. To help stabilize things, Misson introduces the idea of communal stores, a shared resource hut where citizens can contribute and borrow basic goods, tools, medicine, fishing lines. It's noble in theory. In practice, it's just a hut with a single rusty key and a logbook so scribbled it might as well be a treasure map. One morning, the entire store is found empty except for a single mango and a note that reads, "Trust is the only true currency." The citizens vote to find the culprit. The mango is eaten while they wait. Despite the chaos, there's a rhythm to it all. People learn to trust certain traders. Social capital becomes more valuable than fish or feathers. You know who makes the best nets, who never cheats on exchanges, and who thinks they're good at fermentation but should really stop. And somehow, amid the madness, a kind of economy does grow. Not sleek or stable, or understood by any economist, mind you, but organic, human, messy, like everything else in Libertalia. You lie in your hammock one warm evening, flipping through the ledger and watching the stars flicker like coins tossed into a vast dark sea. Somewhere nearby, someone sings about the town's first spoon trade scandal, and the air smells of roasted root vegetables and clove smoke. You smile, wondering what tomorrow's trade will bring. Maybe bananas, maybe books, maybe just another wild promise scrawled in hopeful ink. It happens subtly at first, like a bad song that starts quietly and ends up stuck in your head. Libertalia begins making enemies. You're tending to your morning chores, trading 2 eggshell earrings for a threadbare shirt, politely declining a breakfast poem offered in exchange for rum, when word spreads. A slaver ship from Zanzibar has been sighted off the coast. It flew no flags, ignored the usual distance of respect, and then vanished into the morning mist. Misson calls a town assembly, which means everyone shuffles into the square carrying coconuts, confusion, and at least one chicken who insists on attending all political events. He speaks firmly, his voice sharp with conviction. We are a haven for the free, but that means there are those who would see us as an insult, an infection. We must be ready. Nobody likes the sound of that, especially the part about ready, since the closest thing Libertalia has to a defense force is a militia made of 12 bored sailors, a goat, and one very aggressive man with a ladle. You're assigned to organize watch posts, a job made more complicated by the fact that no one can agree on where north is. After half a day of heated debate, a general pointing system is established using tree names, the location of the best hammock, and a large crab named Admiral Pinchy, who lives under a specific rock. Libertalia, by its very nature, threatens the existing order. The idea of a society with no kings, no slavery, and no taxes is deeply upsetting to slavers, merchants, and colonial governors nearby. Word gets around, and not all the gossip is flattering. You hear rumors. 1. That Libertalia is harboring escaped slaves. True. 2. That its people are armed anarchists who worship bread. Only partially true. 3. That Misson plans to build a navy of murder boats. Wildly untrue, but catchy. Historians still argue how much real power Libertalia ever had, but most agree that its greatest threat wasn't military. It was ideological, a place that proves ordinary people can govern themselves. That's a dangerous idea, especially when your whole empire rests on the assumption they can't. The slavers return within a week. 3 ships anchored just beyond the reef. Their flags, once hidden, now ripple clearly. Portuguese, Dutch, and Omani. The message is clear. This is a warning. Misson responds with a gift basket. You help assemble it. Dried fish, fermented cloves, hand-woven scarves, and a copy of the Libertalia Code rolled into a scroll and tied with a ribbon. A small note reads, "We are not your enemy. We are your alternative." The basket is loaded into a canoe and paddled out by a volunteer who claims to be very charming when nervous. He returns with arrows in the hull and no reply. Tensions rise. That night, defensive preparations begin. You help stack barrels, reinforce the docks, sharpen what few blades you have. A group of volunteers builds a makeshift cannon mount from old wagon wheels and a dining table. It rolls backwards when fired, knocking over a fruit cart. Meanwhile, internal tensions simmer. Some citizens want to prepare for war. Others insist on peace. One faction proposes relocating inland. Another wants to negotiate a mutual trade agreement with the people who just fired warning shots. At one heated council meeting, a man stands and says, "This isn't what I came for. I came for freedom, not fighting." He is met with silence. You realize he's voicing what many are thinking. Libertalia is changing. You too start to notice. New rules are proposed. Curfews, rationing, mandatory training. The Constitution is cited, amended, debated. More parchment is used in 1 week than the previous 3 months combined. Someone proposes electing a full-time minister of defense. That title alone causes a half-day argument over what a minister even is. And in the midst of it all, the goat, possibly sensing stress, starts sleeping in the council hut. Not all enemies are distant. One evening, a Malagasy envoy arrives from a nearby village. His tone is polite but firm. He brings a message. Some locals are uncomfortable with Libertalia's growth. They fear drawing attention from slave traders or colonial navies. They don't want warships stalking the coast, and Libertalia, with its idealism and occasional cannon tests, is beginning to look like a target. The envoy offers no threat, just a question. Will you defend yourselves if we do not? Misson nods slowly. We will not ask others to die for our dream, but we will not stop dreaming. The response is beautiful. It is also potentially suicidal. You spend your next shift walking the beach at dusk, watching shadows gather near the waves. The fires back in town flicker against the breeze, and for a moment you hear singing, gentle, defiant,
and badly off-key. The enemies are real now, not just theoretical slavers or imagined empires, but hunger, fear, doubt. Libertalia is no longer a secret, it is a statement. And statements, like flags, like constitutions, like loudly idealistic Frenchmen in red velvet coats, tend to attract attention. The next morning, someone spots another ship on the horizon, bigger this time, closer, and someone has drawn a skull on the side of your flag. By the time you notice the walls haven't been built, it's already too late. It hits you during a planning meeting where Misson, ever the optimist, is proposing a new amphitheater to be carved from driftwood and coral. A place for debate, he says, for song and story. You glance around at the town's patchwork huts, the goat chewing on the corner of the Constitution scroll, the children chasing chickens through the square, and you realize there are no fortifications. Not a single stone wall. No watchtowers that actually watch anything. Just a few lookouts with tin spyglasses and a man who insists he can smell danger on the wind. You raise your hand. Shouldn't we have something that makes it harder for people to kill us? The council stares blankly. Someone coughs. One man suggests reinforcing the hammocks. Another says, "But walls feel monarchical." Still, you push the idea. Slowly, reluctantly, a team is formed to begin light fortification. This mostly involves stacking barrels in a vaguely intimidating fashion and assigning people to lean on them while looking stern. You spend your mornings digging shallow trenches. Truly shallow, since the shovels are also being used for cooking, laundry, and, inexplicably, a nightly storytelling game called Buried Secrets. Someone suggests building a palisade, but the available wood supply consists of broken oars, wet firewood, and 2 termite-infested planks with property of the British East India Company still faintly visible. The joke around town is that Libertalia will be the only republic overthrown by a stiff breeze and a pointed look. But you try. You organize teams. You sketch defensive lines in the sand. You name the ditches after famous pirates, Anne Bonny's ditch, Long John's low spot, etc. And at night, when the stars are sharp above you and the only sound is the distant lap of waves, you lie awake imagining what an actual siege might look like. Historians still argue whether Misson genuinely believed the town didn't need fortifications, or whether he just knew they'd never have the resources. His journals, such as they are, suggest a mix of both. In one entry he writes, "If we become a fortress, we become the thing we fled." Noble, poetic, and soon to be deeply regrettable. Because trouble is coming. One morning you hear shouting. A scout rushes in, barefoot, bleeding, breathless, and gasps out 2 words. "They're close!" 2 ships, possibly more behind them, Portuguese colors, and cannons. The town mobilizes, sort of. The barrel wall is hastily reinforced with bags of spoiled cassava and one particularly courageous pig. Volunteers grab anything vaguely weapon-shaped, knives, paddles, blunt instruments, a large spoon sharpened on coral. Misson gives a rousing speech atop a crate. You're not sure what he says because halfway through someone sets off a celebratory firework and spooks half the town. A vote is held on how best to respond. Options range from
diplomatic overtures, to ambush in the mangroves, to pretend to be ghosts. The ghost plan comes surprisingly close to passing. Ultimately, Misson and the council settle on a strategic delay, a show of unity and minimal resistance meant to buy time and perhaps defuse aggression. You're asked to help prepare a peace feast. Not exactly standard siege protocol, but this is Libertalia. The visitors don't bite, literally and figuratively. They send a message ashore. Disband, return escaped property, submit to search and seizure, or be erased. Misson's response is simple. He returns their message wrapped in a net full of rotten fish. It's not subtle. Panic simmers under the surface. Citizens begin building barricades with driftwood furniture. Someone positions a catapult made from a bent palm tree and a hammock. You help load it with sea urchins. It fires backwards. The goat survives. There are arguments in the square. One faction calls for surrender. Another demands a preemptive strike. One man proposes an emergency tax to fund the militia and is immediately shouted down on principle. You try to calm people, but the truth is clear. Libertalia is a dream with no walls, a poem armed with fish guts, and the enemy knows it. That night, a storm rolls in. Not a big one, just enough to soak everything and make the cannons damp and the torches flicker. The boats remain on the horizon, lit like floating ghosts, patient and unblinking. You find Misson sitting alone beneath the flagpole, his coat heavy with rain. "We should have built them, huh?" you say quietly. He doesn't look at you. "Walls, maybe, but they don't stop fear from getting in." "Or cannonballs," you add because you're helpful like that. He chuckles. "No, but they make for good metaphors in the aftermath." At dawn, the enemy makes no move. They just wait. And Libertalia, with its library of half-soggy books, its sandbag walls, and noble goat-filled optimism, waits right back. The Library of Libertalia is technically just a shack with a leaky roof and 3 shelves, one of which has collapsed under the weight of its own philosophical ambition. But to the citizens, it is sacred ground. It sits nestled between the bakery, which mostly makes bread-shaped root vegetables, and the official town school, which has 2 chalkboards, 1 parrot, and a very enthusiastic teacher who insists on assigning homework despite the absence of desks. You open the creaky door one muggy morning to the usual smell: salt air, old paper, and a faint trace of clove oil used to keep the termites confused. Inside, the librarian, an ex-priest named Etienne, who now prefers to go by Brother Fred, waves without looking up from a copy of Plutarch's Lives that's been annotated with jokes in 4 languages. His chair is a rum barrel with a cushion. The entire place leans slightly to the left, as if it's also trying to understand Enlightenment theory. The collection? Eccentric, to say the least. The crown jewel is a half-complete Latin Bible, missing most of Genesis and all of Leviticus, but lovingly illuminated with drawings of sea turtles. Next to it, a Jesuit field manual on converting heathens, now repurposed as a kind of gardening guide. There's a French political treatise covered in biscuit crumbs, a Dutch book on maritime law someone turned into a diary, and several pirate confessionals, most of which read more like action-packed novellas featuring far more shirtless duels than actual introspection. And then there's The Diary of Milo. Milo was a Libertalia crewman known more for his chronic seasickness than any acts of valor. His diary, bound in what may be fish skin, contains vivid entries like, "Today I saw a jellyfish. I screamed. I regret nothing. The bread was too hard. It tasted of regret and possibly shoe. Miss Sabine tried to teach us Latin. The goat ate her notes." Historians still argue whether Milo existed or was simply a town invention, a literary mascot who expressed what no idealist pirate dared say aloud. His diary is so popular it's been recopied twice, each version adding more exaggeration and fewer coherent dates. One passage discusses a floating city of mirrors, which may have been a Portuguese galleon or just heat stroke. You help Brother Fred reorganize the library one slow afternoon. The books are sorted by broad themes, like freedomish things, morals probably, fish lore, and ye old romance, which mostly contains letters between separated lovers arguing about coconut recipes. Someone donates a Portuguese anatomy book filled with careful sketches of organs and blanked out naughty bits. It becomes wildly popular with the town's medical staff, which consists of one woman with a steady hand and a suspicious number of bandages. The anatomy book is stored on the top shelf, under lock and key, and is referred to, somewhat reverently, as the manual. It's not just books here. The citizens contribute too. Michon himself pens occasional essays, scrawled on sailcloth entitled things like "Reflections on Equality While Eating Mangoes" and "Why We Do Not Slap Each Other, Except Sometimes." You add a few entries of your own, simple things, observations, drawings, a list of all the different names people have given the same 4 chickens. Someone else contributes poetry carved into driftwood. Someone else paints a mural of Bread King, the flag mascot, on the ceiling. The library becomes more than a storage space. It's a memory palace, a declaration. Every town has its defenses, walls, weapons, treaties. Libertalias are ideas, stories, jokes etched into margins, and the stubborn belief that thinking matters. One day, a young boy from the village asks if he can borrow a book. Brother Fred blinks. "You want to read?" "No," says the boy. "I want to draw in it." Permission granted. A new tradition is born. Every book in the library becomes a collaborative canvas. Margins fill with doodles, corrections, arguments. One volume of political theory now contains a full dramatic play about fish rebellion. Another includes a map of town gossip updated weekly. The marine life section doubles as an unofficial dating registry. There's something sacred about it all. Not the books themselves. They're moldy, rat-chewed, constantly being used as cup holders, but what they represent. That here, in a place founded by outlaws and dreamers, ideas are allowed to live and change and wear silly hats if they want to. But danger creeps even here. One night you discover a book missing, a rare Jesuit codex, ornate binding, delicate calligraphy, filled with arguments about the soul and soup preparation. Someone's taken it, and not just to read by torchlight. The pages were found floating in the harbor the next day, soggy and half burned. A message? A prank? Or just someone trying to make soup? The council takes it seriously. There are whispered fears of spies or ideological fractures, but mostly there's a sense of loss. You hold one charred page up to the light and read, "To think is to resist. To question is to live." The ink runs like tears. The next day, a sign appears on the library door. No burning, no stealing, no licking the parchment. Ideas belong to everyone. A quiet wind rustles the pages within, and somewhere, among the stacked fish crate shelves, the words of Milo still echo. May we never run out of ink or good excuses. It starts with a banana. Not a shortage exactly, just a quiet realization, one damp morning, that the communal stores contain exactly 0 bananas. Not dried, not fresh, not even that suspicious overripe one that always seemed to hover at the bottom of the fruit basket. You're helping unload a canoe stuffed with cassava and salted fish when the cry goes up, "We're out!" A ripple of panic spreads. Madame Sabine drops a bowl of fermented clove mash. A parrot yells, "Banana bankruptcy!" Someone faints dramatically into a pile of coconut husks. The truth hits you like a moldy plantain. No one planted anything. In all the furious constitution writing, spoon bartering, and freedom to hammock scheduling, basic agriculture had been politely ignored. The nearby village had been trading food, sure, and some foraging happened on the edges of the mangroves. But as a town, Libertalia hadn't so much as dug a garden bed. Misson calls a meeting. You gather under the tamarind tree, where most major crises seem to be addressed, sitting cross-legged beside people who've never held a hoe in their lives, but feel strongly about tuber policy. We are entering a period of nutritional transition, Misson says delicately. Someone in the back shouts, "You mean we're gonna eat leaves?" A vote is held on the official terminology. Banana emergency narrowly beats nutritional opportunity. The problem escalates quickly. Breakfast becomes root mash with essence of dried fish. Lunch, more root mash. Dinner, a communal stew thickened with crushed dreams and clove water. One citizen tries to ferment mango skins into a wine substitute. The results taste like spicy despair. The children stage a protest. They march through the square with signs that read, "Bring back the bunch," and "1 banana equals 1 vote." They demand more potassium representation in council decisions. You're put on the Emergency Agricultural Task Force, alongside 2 fishermen, 1 self-declared soil wizard, and a chicken named Democracy. Technically, she just hangs out, but she's very assertive. Your group quickly discovers that the soil near town is rocky, sun-baked, and deeply suspicious of anything with roots. The better land lies farther inland near streams and beyond the town's defense perimeter, which consists mainly of pointed sticks and hope. Still, you begin planting. Bananas, taro, sugarcane. Seeds are traded for at great cost. One person gives away their last tin of salt for a single papaya pit. Meanwhile, the food riots start small. 2 neighbors argue over a half-eaten yam. a loaf of suspiciously bread-shaped mashed cassava is stolen from the bakery. A woman begins hoarding dried sea lettuce under her hammock and charging people to look at it. Historians still debate whether the so-called banana shortage riots of Libertalia qualify as real riots. No one dies. One person gets gently slapped with a leak. Another is sent to timeout duty after throwing a coconut at the school's lesson board. Still, tensions rise. The council begins discussing rations. Misson proposes shared meals. Madame Sabine insists on banana bread reparations, once bananas return, of course. The Hammock Ethics Committee recommends mandatory pre-meal gratitude rituals, which include interpretive dance. Desperate. Someone suggests importing food from the Portuguese, despite their obvious distaste for libertarian politics. The vote is nearly tied. Misson refuses on principle, citing the Constitution's clause against catering to monarchists. You try to distract the town with a festival. It's called the Festival of Missing Fruit. There's music, a coconut shucking contest, and a dramatic reenactment of the Great Papaya Disappointment. Bread King, the mascot, makes an appearance, holding a banana-shaped scepter and declaring, "Let us peel together." Morale improves, briefly, but hunger lingers. It's a low throb, not starvation, but a kind of dietary grief. People dream about bananas. They hum banana songs. A man paints a fresco of a banana tree weeping into the sea. One morning, a trade canoe arrives from a Malagasy village bearing gifts, bananas, dozens of them, sweet, ripe, golden. You help unload them like they're sacred relics. In exchange, Libertalia offers books, fish, songs, a homemade map with helpful lies about Spanish ship routes. The deal is accepted. The village elder smiles. "Now, maybe," she says, "you'll plant your own." And you do. Banana trees spring up across the inland plots. Misson even lets one grow through his hut roof. He calls it the tree of future security. You call it what it is, long overdue planning. The crisis doesn't end overnight, but it passes. Meals improve, spirits rise. The library receives a new book, The Practical Cultivation of Fruit in Substandard Conditions. Someone draws a mustache on the cover model, but the advice inside is solid. You sit by a campfire one night, peeling a banana, while listening to the usual evening song circle. A fiddler plays softly. Children laugh. Democracy the chicken pecks quietly near your foot. And you realize something important. Libertalia isn't fragile because it lacks resources. It's fragile because it forgets that even utopias need roots, not just in philosophy, but in dirt. The next morning, you volunteer to build compost bins. The banana tree by Misson's hut grows another inch. The sun creeps over Libertalia like a slow apology. You're sitting near the harbor, watching the surf roll in against the half-sunken canoe someone once tried to convert into a floating bookstore, when a strange sight appears on the horizon. A small ship, white sails snapping against the wind. No cannons visible, no flag flying, just a lone figure at the prow, wearing robes and squinting through a brass spyglass. Word spreads fast. "Jesuit," someone hisses. You raise an eyebrow. A real Jesuit or one of the musical kind? It turns out to be an actual Jesuit, Father Lorenzo Marti, an emissary from Goa, who arrives carrying nothing but a walking stick, a satchel full of pamphlets, and the kind of earnestness that makes you instinctively check your pockets. He steps ashore, bows politely to the goat, and announces, "I come not to convert, but to listen." A silence follows, broken only by the parrot squawking, "Sure you do." Misson welcomes him cautiously. After all, the last time a man in robes came bearing peace, he also came with charts for the Inquisition's preferred landing points. But this one, Father Lorenzo, is different. He asks questions. He quotes philosophy. He samples the clove stew without grimacing. He's either very sincere or very good at pretending to be so. You're assigned to accompany him on his cultural tour, partly because you speak enough Portuguese to translate, and partly because you're one of the few people who hasn't yet threatened to throw a book at him. He visits the library, of course. He lingers over the half-burned codex, muttering, "This handwriting, Jesuit, Sicilian, likely 1640s. He weeps openly when shown Milo's diary, not from reverence, from laughter. He asks to meet the council, attends debates, listens to grievances. He witnesses a town vote over whether goats should be allowed to serve as symbolic guardians. They're approved, pending training. He's even present when someone proposes outlawing the phrase nutritional opportunity. The town begins to warm to him. A few citizens call him Padre Banana after he plants a sapling near the library. Even Madame Sabine offers him a tab at her tavern, a rare honor, previously only extended to the town's most persuasive liar. Still, not everyone is convinced. Some suspect Lorenzo is gathering intelligence. Others think he's here to tempt Misson into alliance with Catholic powers. Libertalia, after all, is an ideological thorn, a place without kings, without slavery, without mass, the kind of place that makes European courts very nervous. Tensions rise when Lorenzo requests a private audience with Misson. You're invited to attend. You sit in the corner of Misson's hut, nursing a coconut shell of something fermented, while the Jesuit and the captain trade ideas like chess players with missing pieces. Lorenzo speaks softly. "You've built a city of free souls, but souls still need tending." Misson's response is gentle but firm. They are tended, not by fear or confession, but by choice and kindness. You lack structure. We lack shackles. You lack divine order. We have shared hammocks. Historians still debate exactly what Lorenzo proposed that day. Some claim he offered diplomatic recognition, protection in exchange for a little religious oversight. Others suggest he floated the idea of a Jesuit advisory council. A few even say he asked to stay, to become Libertalia's first priest in residence. Whatever it was, the answer was no. Not cruelly, just firmly. Misson shook his hand, offered him another bowl of the clove stew, and said, "This is not a church. This is a chorus." Lorenzo stays another week, then announces his departure. He leaves behind a few books, a set of seed packets labeled in Latin, and a note in the library guest book. "In admiration of your madness and your mangoes. Pax." The day he sails away, the whole town watches from the beach. A few wave. Someone throws a coconut in ceremonial farewell. The parrot shouts, "Come back with snacks." But just as his ship disappears behind the reef, another one appears. This one is not peaceful. It flies no flag. It glides in silent, swift, and gray, like a shark with sails. A merchant vessel, maybe, or a slaver reconnoitering. Within hours, chaos begins. A visiting trader accuses a libertalian of stealing. A minor squabble turns into a full-fledged duel. In the square, with frying pans and dramatic declarations, 2 goats get involved. One bystander loses a shirt. Misson tries to calm everyone. "This is not who we are," he says. Someone shouts back, "Who are we then?" It's the question no one wants to answer. The presence of outsiders, first a Jesuit, now these silent ships, has rattled something deep. What began as a dream is now a living town with factions, tensions, and simmering suspicion. Old debates resurface. Are they a republic or a commune? A free city or a target? And then betrayal. One morning a canoe is found missing, along with 2 barrels of rum, a stack of official documents, and one of the few working muskets. The suspect? A newcomer, barely here a month, who'd argued frequently against Misson's no slavery, no tax policies, and once declared bread an inferior food group. Gone. No trace. Worse, a day later, a local village sends word. The missing man arrived with stories. Stories about weakness, about lack of walls, about ships full of gold ready for the taking. Suddenly, the looming threat isn't just philosophical, it's imminent. You sit on the beach that evening, watching the stars emerge like hesitant witnesses. The banana trees rustle behind you, the flag flutters softly, and someone lights a torch too early, its flame casting long, nervous shadows. You wonder, not for the first time, how long a republic built on stories and driftwood can hold its shape when the waves come crashing in. You always assumed the end would come with gunpowder, with cannonballs splitting the sky and battle cries echoing across the reef. Instead, it starts with silence. Not a dramatic kind of silence either. No ominous thunderclouds or sudden hush as a mysterious ship appears. Just an ordinary morning, a little too still. The sea flat as glass, the birds oddly quiet, and most importantly, no rum. You discover this at Madame Sabine's, where the daily ration usually involves something fruity, something spicy, and something that burns on the way down. But today, nothing. Not a single drop. The barrels are empty. The backup barrels are empty. Even the emergency reserve barrel, hidden behind the pickled limes, is gone. You glance at Sabine. She's usually pale. "We're dry," she whispers. "Dry." The word falls like a stone in a well. The news spreads. Within hours, the mood in Libertalia sours faster than overripe breadfruit. People mill around the square, dazed, as if their hammocks have been confiscated. Someone sobs quietly by the fire pit. Someone else starts reciting bad poetry, which is a sure sign of civic decline. No one's panicking yet, but you can feel the edges fray. Rum wasn't just a drink. It was currency, ritual, anesthetic, and peacekeeper. Arguments ended over shared cups. Trades were sealed with toasts. Even council meetings had an official bottle, the gavel, they called it. Whoever held it spoke, then passed it along. Now, just the sound of dry lips and rising tension. Missin convenes an emergency assembly. The tamarind tree groans under the weight of worried citizens. You sit near the front, behind the hammock ethics committee, who look visibly anxious and possibly hungover. Missin stands, hands clasped. "This is not a failure," he says. "It is an opportunity, a test of our community spirit." Someone throws a coconut. It misses. Historians still argue whether this moment marked the beginning of Libertalia's unraveling. The lack of rum may seem trivial in the grand scope of revolutions, but here, where shared cups were practically a civic duty, it felt like someone had taken the music out of the song. The council scrambles for solutions. Option 1, ferment something else. They try bananas. Tastes like vinegar. They try cassava. Tastes like betrayal. They try a moldy mango that's been under a hammock since the banana shortage. It nearly kills a goat. Option 2, negotiate for a new shipment. But the trusted trade partners have grown wary. Word of tension, desertions, and philosophical duels has reached nearby villages. You overhear a merchant from Mahajanga mutter, "I won't trade with a town that doesn't know how to party." Option 3, tighten order. This is where things get dicey. Without rum to smooth the rough edges, the council starts drafting actual rules, schedules, rationing, work assignments. Missin calls them temporary communal guidelines, but they smell suspiciously like laws. One parchment reads, "No public shouting after sundown. All foraging groups must return by dusk. Voting limited to daytime assemblies. One person per hammock, strictly enforced." You post the notices yourself. They vanish within hours, replaced by charcoal graffiti. "This is not what we toasted to." It's hard to describe the atmosphere. Nobody's openly rebelling, yet, but people stop laughing quite so easily. Fewer songs, more closed doors. The tavern, Madame Sabine's once boisterous haven, is now a whispery place, where people sip bitter clove tea and pretend it's rum. The food still holds out, bananas, root mash, some fish, but the joy? Fading. Arguments spark faster now, over trade, over hammocks, over whether Bread King should be depicted with or without eyebrows. It becomes a whole thing. A mural is defaced. The ethics committee gets involved. One night, a brawl breaks out between two council members over meeting times. A fish is thrown. The goat intervenes. Order is restored, but something has snapped. You talk to Misson. He looks older, tired, the red velvet coat now faded to rust. He fiddles with a carved pipe that hasn't been smoked in weeks. "I thought the dream was strong enough," he says. "But dreams run on fuel, too." "You mean rum?" "I mean trust, but yes, also rum." To his credit, Misson doesn't give up. He calls for music, for stories, for a new celebration, the Festival of Empty Barrels. A joke, but a hopeful one. You help hang decorations made of dried gourd slices and leftover Constitution scraps. Only a dozen people show up. The next day, the trading canoe doesn't return. No explanation, just silence. The rum has run out. The optimism is running thin, and the republic that once felt like a carnival of ideas
is now a quiet town with too many rules and too few toasts. That evening, as you sit by the fire pit with a tin cup of hot banana broth, not a sentence you ever thought you'd say, someone mutters, "I didn't come here to be told when to sleep." You hear it echoed the next morning, louder, bolder. Freedom is wonderful when everyone's happy and tipsy and full of mashed cassava, but without the lubrication of shared rituals, and yes, a little alcohol, democracy gets cranky. Libertalia isn't dead. Not yet. But you can feel something shifting, something brittle working its way into the seams. And off the coast, ships still gather. Firelight crackles. You wake to shouting, loud, confused, urgent. Somewhere, a drum is being beaten in a rhythm that sounds like panic wrapped in indecision. You stagger out of your hut to find the square in chaos. A small bonfire burns near the library steps, and the air smells like ink and scorched leather. The Constitution, the original scroll, is gone. Or rather, it's ash. It's not immediately clear who did it. A group had been drinking clove mash, arguing long into the night about new restrictions, and someone made a bonfire. What started as symbolic burning of the rule editions, the rationing orders, the curfew notices, spread, quickly, sloppily. No one stopped it. And now the one document that held Libertalia together in ink and idealism is nothing but smoldering fragments. You find one blackened piece near your boot. The only legible word, equal. For a long moment, no one speaks. Then the arguments begin. Not philosophical, not thoughtful, furious. Shouting fills the square. Some want a new scroll written immediately. Others insist it was fate, that the Constitution had been corrupted. One man claims the fire was a political act. Another claims it was a goat. It wasn't. Democracy the goat was asleep in the bakery. Misson arrives late, barefoot, eyes wide. When he sees the ashes, something in him flickers. "We can rebuild," he says quietly, but no one's listening. Within hours, the citizens begin forming factions, not just ideological camps, but real named groups. The remnants, those who want the old Constitution restored word for word. The rebooters, who think it's time for a completely new order with firmer laws. The freehands, who say rules are the problem and that true freedom needs no parchment. The fellowship of the flagless, mostly just three guys who hate meetings and now meet anyway. You find yourself caught in the middle. Literally. You're assigned to help mediate a series of restoration discussions under the tamarind tree, which now serves as a sort of chaotic, open-air parliament. There are shouting matches about grammar, accusations of goat favoritism, and long arguments over whether hammocks should be listed under civic rights or basic luxuries. No one agrees on anything, except that something must be done. The debates stretch for days. You try to keep notes, but the pages fill with corrections, arrows, drawings, crossed-out articles, and one very angry doodle of Bread King crushing a ballot box. One proposal gains traction, a council of 5, representing the major factions, each to draft one section of the new Constitution. But the freehands refuse. They say, "We don't do councils," while attending the council meeting and voting to abolish it. Still, the writing begins. You're there when the remnants present their first draft. It's rigid, formal, stuffed with clauses about property, votes, and even timekeeping.
You blink at Article 17, no more than 2 songs per meal. The rebooters push back with their own scroll, flowing, poetic, and totally impractical. It includes a right to bananas and something called the Eternal Sunset Clause, which no one understands but everyone claps for. The free hands submit a blank page. When asked why, their leader shrugs and says, "It's symbolic. Also, we ran out of ink." Tempers flare, fists fly, a chair is thrown, someone calls for a duel, but no one can agree on the weapon. Eventually, a compromise is proposed. All groups will present their version at the Assembly of Refounding, to be held at the festival grounds. Meanwhile, old tensions boil over. Remember the man who stole the canoe? Word reaches Libertalia that he's returned to a Portuguese port. He's told stories, named names, described the layout of the town. One ship has already been seen lurking beyond the reef. Another was spotted north, near the mangrove path. Misson issues a call for unity. His voice is hoarse, his coat dust-streaked. This was never about parchment. It's about the promise we made to each other. But the room is split. Some citizens are openly arming themselves. The Hammock Defense League drills with fishing spears. Others are packing their belongings, muttering about safer shores. In the confusion, a second fire breaks out, this one in the library's annex. Dozens of handwritten pages are lost. Milo's diary survives, mostly. The Bread King mural is scorched, one eyebrow missing, which leads to renewed mural-based debates. You lie awake that night in your hammock, the town eerily quiet, broken only by the gentle creak of rope and the soft rustle of wind-stirred ashes. The stars above you feel indifferent, scattered across the sky like ink on a page that's already been crumpled. In the morning, you'll attend the assembly. Maybe something will be salvaged. But for now, all you can think about is that one burned word at your feet. Equal. It was never perfect, but it meant something. And now, it's gone. You wake before dawn to the unmistakable sound of drumming. Not festive drumming, not banana festival drumming. This is something tighter, sharper, a signal. You throw on your least damp shirt, grab a dull blade someone once told you was ceremonial, and run toward the main path. It's finally happening. The siege, if you can call it that, starts just after sunrise. 2 ships, Portuguese flags, black powder primed, sails trimmed tight. They anchor in the shallows like predators who know their prey is already limping. The gunners on the deck move slowly, confidently. You see no banners calling for parley, no gestures of diplomacy. Misson stands at the shoreline, barefoot, coat open, holding the faded Libertalia flag. He doesn't speak. He just plants the flag in the sand and walks back into town. You admire the defiance, even if it's deeply impractical. The enemy doesn't land right away. They fire a warning shot instead. It hits the edge of the banana grove. Trees topple. A goat screams. You watch as the smoke curls upward and think, that was our breakfast. Panic is instantaneous. Citizens scatter. Half the town runs for the southern path, the so-called escape route, which turns out to be mostly thorn bushes and one particularly unhelpful lemur. The other half heads to their defensive positions. Unfortunately, many of those positions are still theoretical. You rush to your assigned post near the square, which consists of 3 barrels, 1 overturned table, and a bow with a single arrow that's been broken and retied with seaweed. Across town, the cannons fire again. This time it's the library. You hear the boom, feel the ground tremble slightly, and watch as the roof of the cherished, half-leaky structure lifts briefly into the air before collapsing like a stage prop. The town gasps. Even the goats stopped mid-chew. Inside, a fire starts. You run toward it instinctively, dodging smoke, embers, and a loose chicken. The shelves are collapsing. Pages float like burned feathers. You grab what you can: Milo's diary, a charred piece of the Constitution, a damp volume labeled Philosophical Reflections on Fish. It's not much, but it's something. Outside, the town is unraveling. The council is gone, disbanded in a shouting match the night before. The defense plan is a patchwork of half-dug trenches, hopeful barricades, and extremely confused volunteers. Some citizens take cover. Others try to organize counterattack. One man charges toward the beach with a bread paddle, shouting, "For democracy!" He is promptly tackled by a parrot handler who insists the phrase must be properly voted on before it becomes a battle cry. You see Missin again, standing in the central square. He holds no weapons, just that same old scroll fragment and a bottle of mango mash he's clearly too tired to enjoy. "We hold," he mutters. "For what?" someone asks. He doesn't answer. The third cannonball takes out the watchtower, such as it was. The lookout shouts, "Duck!" A full 2 seconds too late. A spray of splinters rains down on the